Hey there, all you beautiful souls. I hope your day has been absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you back for yet another exciting episode of What If Naruto Was the Descendant of Scorpion. Don't forget to pay a visit to the author of this captivating fanfiction and show them some love. You'll find the link waiting for you down in the description. Uzumaki Naruto sacrificed his life to protect a precious person, but instead of going to the afterlife, Naruto finds himself face to face with the remains of a soul that was locked away deep within his own soul. A soul filled with fury and vengeance of a family and clan that was taken from him. How will this chance meeting change Naruto, and will it be for better? If this what if is sparking your curiosity, drop a comment down below and share your thoughts. And while you're at it, don't miss out on exploring the plethora of other intriguing what ifs available on this very channel. Alright, let's not keep you waiting any longer, let's dive right into this thought-provoking video. Village of Hisako. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. This baby-faced blonde wields the power of hellfire. The same hellfire that has rendered many here asunder. Naruto responded calmly, but the smirk on his face seemed to grow. Let's see how you handle the heat of it. Kidomaru laughed boisterously at Naruto. Look at this cocky guy. Thinks he's the main boss when he's nothing but a mook, Kidomaru exclaimed with a laugh, but Teiwaya still remained silent, as if she was rooted in fear by the blonde standing below them within the crater. Kidomaru, this isn't a game, look at what this guy has done, Teiwaya stated as she swept her hand over the entire area where tons of their shinobi lay deceased, some of them still on fire. This guy is dangerous. We need to kill him now. Oh, I know, Kidomaru stated to her with a frown on his face. But I need to taunt him a little bit. Without warning, Naruto appeared in front of Kidomaru and cold-cocked the shinobi in the face, sending the multi-limbed shinobi sailing toward the ground. Teiwaya took a step back and pulled out a kunai with her right hand, and lunged it towards Naruto's head, but the shinobi moved his head to the right, in order to avoid it, where he then grabbed her right wrist. The two locked eyes for a moment, her face twisted in a scowl while he had a grin on his face. Far too slow to strike me, Naruto told her. Just then, Naruto leaned forward and rammed his right elbow into her gut, then raised his elbow upwards sharply, nailing her underneath the chin, which sent her off of the pillar they were standing on. Teiwaya managed to land on her feet and quickly pulled out several kunai, and launched them towards the blonde male. While in the air, Naruto summoned his hellfire chain and twirled it around quickly, deflecting the many kunai that were heading his way before thrusting it to her as he shouted, "Get over here." Teiwaya dashed backward to avoid the fire-made kunai, but Naruto tugged at it hard to send him soaring to the ground where he landed in a crouch. Naruto quickly rose up and aimed a punch at her head, but Teiwaya leaned back to avoid the punch, and aimed a kick to his gut. Naruto caught her extended foot by the ankle, pulled her close, and punched her in the middle of the face, sending her upper body slamming into the ground. Naruto gripped her leg and began to turn his body clockwise at a fast rate, slowly lifting Teiwaya off the ground with each go round before he let go of her leg, sending her sailing through the air, before she crashed against a steel beam. Child's play, Naruto chuckled out loud to himself with a cross of his arms. Just then, Kidomaru leaped out of the rubble he had fallen into and shouted, "Kumusoka, spiderweb flower." Kidomaru spat out several strands of web towards Naruto. Naruto saw this and summoned his hellfire kunai and shot it towards Kidomaru's webs. Naruto quickly released his hold on the chair, and fired several more chains toward the Oto shinobi's web, which caused each web to melt under his extreme heat. Kidomaru snarled and avoided the chains that Naruto sent before he jumped into the air and shouted, "Kumo Nenkin." He placed his 6 hands against his mouth, and pulled out this golden, sticky material, which quickly took the shape of kunai, and became hard as steel, which he then launched towards Naruto's running form. Naruto slammed his foot against the flat side of the Kubikiri Hacho, to unearth it from where he stabbed it down, and used it to deflect the golden kunai, that had come towards him, before he twisted his body, and launched the blade towards the 6-armed shinobi. Kidomaru growled and moved to the side to avoid the blade, and once again pulled the sticky gold material from his mouth, but instead of kunai, each strand of the gold material became short blades. Kidomaru landed in front of Naruto and began to stab the short swords towards the Uzumaki, but the shinobi avoided each strike as fast as he could, and then performed a backflip out of nowhere, kicking Kidomaru underneath the chin, to put the 6-armed shinobi unbalanced, while Naruto went backward in the air. Naruto recovered in the air and sent a hellfire chain toward Kidomaru, which impaled the shinobi in the chest before Naruto shouted, "Come here." Naruto then tugged Kidomaru hard enough for him to fly off of his feet, where Naruto smirked and twisted his body in the air repeatedly, causing Kidomaru to swing around in a circular motion, before Naruto let go of the chain, causing the Oto shinobi to soar into a stone pillar, which cracked and exploded upon impact, burying Kidomaru beneath its rubble. Naruto landed on another pillar and crossed his arms in thought. This was going easier than expected. Just then, the sound of a flute reached his ears, causing him to turn his head to stare at Teiwaya, who was glaring at him hateful. Naruto then noticed 3 dark violet chakra blobs forming around him. The blobs then began to take shape into 3 beings, and when the chakra faded away, Naruto was surprised. Standing around him were 3 demons, and while each demon was different in appearance, each demon wielded a different weapon, and all of them were very large and muscular. One wore a dark green full bodysuit, and its hair covered its entire head and face, and it was wielding a giant studded metal club. The other was shirtless and wore dark pants and was bald with scars on its head. It also wore a blindfold, and it wielded a thorn-like weapon tied to each arm. The last had its upper body covered in bandages and wore brown pants. Its head is in an awkward position and has several needles pinned on it. It didn't have arms, so it didn't have any weapons. But each demon has a purple rope-like bell tied in an inverted bow around its waist, similar to Teiwaya's own bow. Naruto was impressed. The only being he had ever known to summon demons was Kwankai, and while these were low-level demons he could take on any time, he was still impressed that a human would be able to summon them with music. She is truly strong, Naruto noted thoughtfully as he stared at her before he shouted vocally. You impress me. To be able to summon demons is a powerful feat. However, these 3 are only low-level demons. They are no match for me. Teiwaya scowled and shouted, you cocky trash. I'll make you eat those words. She then placed the flute to her lips and began to play. The 3 doki immediately launched themselves towards Naruto, who leaped off the pillar backward, his arms still crossed. The spike-wielding doki appeared before him and tried to stab at Naruto at a relentless pace, but Naruto was able to avoid the many strikes, before the club-wielding doki pushed him aside and swung the club down with brutal force, but Naruto smacked the club away and dashed backward, but the 3rd doki appeared behind. Naruto quickly turned around and blocked the roundhouse kick with both of his arms. The force of the kick sent Naruto sailing down to the ground, but he rebounded off of the ground and landed on his feet. The 3 doki appeared with a flicker around Naruto, the spike doki, and the club doki to his left and right respectively, while the kick doki appeared before him. The kick doki aimed a kick to Naruto's face, but Naruto twisted his body to avoid the kick, only to duck the wide side-to-side swing of the club doki, and as he knelt down, he swept his leg under both the club doki and kick doki, sending them both to the ground. Naruto noticed Spike Doki aiming his spikes towards his head and rolling forward onto his feet, before he flipped back and nailed Spike Doki in the face with a Hellfire-infused left kick, sending the Doki stumbling back. Naruto flipped to his feet once more and was kicked in the face by the kick Doki, which sent him flying back into a stone pillar, causing a spider web to crack within it before he fell to the ground, but Naruto got back on his feet to avoid the club swing of Club Doki. Naruto twisted his body around, so he stood behind the club doki and wrapped his arms around the waist of the doki, before bending backwards sharply, slamming the large creature into the ground head first. Naruto dropped to the ground and rolled from under club doki, and rose to his feet just to duck once again due to spike doki, suddenly flicking before him with its right arm already in the stabbing motion. Naruto crouched down and summoned a Hellfire kunai, and rammed it into the gut of the doki, before he rose up sharply, slicing through the body and head of the doki, before he jumped up and kicked the left side of its head, sending it soaring away from the battle. But while Naruto was in the air, Kick Doki flickered in front of Naruto and kicked the shinobi in the chest, sending Naruto flying backward and slamming against another pillar. As Naruto began to fall forward, Kick Doki flickered in front of him again, and kneed Naruto in the gut, causing Naruto to fully go through the pillar at an upward angle, sending him into the air. Naruto managed to catch himself in the air just as Kick Doki flickered in front of him again, but this time, Naruto rammed his Hellfire kunai through the middle of his head. He smirked as the doki went limp and then shouted, "Get over here." The kunai pierced through the doki's skull as the Hellfire chain flew down toward Teiwaya's form. Teiwaya saw this and rolled to the side, allowing the kunai to pierce through the stone. Naruto tugged at the chain hard, while placing his feet up, so when he tugged, his feet slammed into Kick Doki's body, sending the two whipping down to where the kunai was pierced. Once the two got to where the kunai was placed, the stone exploded upon impact, causing smoke to billow from the ruins. Naruto rose up from the rubble and took a step back, panting slightly as he placed his hand over his gut. That was difficult. Naruto turned his head and realized Teiwaya was missing. Without warning, Teiwaya flickered in front of Naruto with her arm cocked back in an attempt to punch him. Naruto sidestepped the punch, but was not able to avoid the sharp jab of her knee which slammed into his gut. Naruto staggered back and swayed left and then right to avoid her quick jabs, before he ducked the third jab, and leaped off the ground to knee her under the chin, sending her into the air. Naruto quickly moved his hand forward and shouted, "Come here," causing the Hellfire chain to shoot out towards her. The chain slammed into Teiwaya's left shoulder. Naruto then pulled her down sharply and released his hold of the chain, before he tackled her out of the air and slammed her into the ground. Teiwaya wrapped her legs around his waist to keep him close, while she swiped her elbows at him, but Naruto grabbed her arms and held her to the ground. Teiwaya growled and leaned her head back before moving it forward sharply, causing her forehead to collide with Naruto's, sending his head whipping backward, but he quickly responded by whipping his head forward and returning the headbutt, sending her head slamming into the ground. Naruto felt her legs around his waist go lax, which allowed him to break out of her hold. Naruto stood up and shook his head, trying to clear the cobwebs from his mind, while Teiwaya slowly rose to her feet as well, just as dazed as Naruto. Just then, the two both heard gotcha. Kumusoka. Teiwaya turned around to face the owner of that noise, before her body whipped into Naruto's body, causing them both to soar back into a stone column, with Kidomaru's web attached to the both of them. Haha. Score in one. Kidomaru exclaimed. When Naruto tilted his head to glance at the shinobi, his eyes whitened in surprise. Kidomaru's entire appearance had changed. His skin had become dark red. His eyes were now sickly yellow with dark black eyes glaring. He had canine teeth and elongated fingernails, and his hair had become longer and gray. He also had horns on his forehead, shoulders, and elbows, and his mouth became wider. Teiwaya noticed his change and said, "Fuck." He activated his curse seal. Curse seal? Naruto thought to himself. That was the reason for this change. Interesting. Naruto looked down at the webbing and noticed that it was golden color, nothing like the web that he had melted earlier, and it was very dense. He could hardly move within its grasp. The perfect trap. Anyone who didn't wield the power of the NarutoxHarem would have a lot of difficulty with it. You two lovebirds were so into your battle, I had to take advantage of it, Kidomaru said, his voice deeper and rougher than before. So thanks for the distraction, Teiwaya, but it's time for me to complete this mission. Teiwaya rolled her eyes and said, yeah. Can you get me out of here now? This isn't an exactly comfortable position, you know. Both Naruto and Teiwaya saw Kidomaru smirk at her words, and suddenly a look of foreboding appeared on Teiwaya's face. Sorry Teiwaya, Kidomaru said, his smirk betraying the tone he was trying to make. But this is where we part ways. Teiwaya's eyes whitened in horror before she said, very funny idiot. Come get me out of here, but despite trying to keep her voice level, Naruto could hear the fear in her voice. Kidomaru shook his head and replied, I can't do that Teiwaya. Kamimaru's orders were, and I quote, the moment we kill the potential threat, you Kidomaru are to exterminate the dead weight known as Teiwaya. And as we both know, if I refuse, he would kill me, so, rather you than me. You fucking cocksucker. Teiwaya shouted in rage, but the fear in her voice rang clear in Naruto's ears. The one thing Naruto could not stand was a betrayal. Not only due to Quan Kai's betrayal but Mizuki's betrayal as well. Even if she was an enemy, she had put up one hell of a fight, while he hid away like a bug under a leaf, and she didn't deserve to die by her scumbag team. Naruto's eyes narrowed in the direction of the multi-limbed shinobi and growled, so you would rather betray your teammate to save your own skin. I'll see you burn for this deception. Kidomaru shrugged and said, rather her than me. As shinobi, we have to make certain sacrifices. It doesn't help that Teiwaya has been a right pain in our asses since she joined up. Her stank attitude was what caused this. Doesn't help that she doesn't even have a curse seal. Literal deadweight. Teiwaya growled in fury at the spider-like shinobi and shouted, I'm going to chop off all of your arms and shove them down your throat and up your ass when I get my hands on you. The shinobi smirked and said, it's a good thing then that I will be killing you from a distance. Kidomaru flipped back to gain some distance before he jumped onto a stone pillar, and when he landed, he created a bow out of his kumonenkin and said, Spider Warbow. Terrible split. But the thick strand of web that became an arrow, he used stood on one leg while using his limbs to pull it about and notch the arrow. Teiwaya began to struggle violently as she shouted, damn you Kidomaru. Calm down, Naruto admonished with a frown on his face. I can get us out of this. I just need you to stay still. Stay still, how can I trust you to get us out of here? We just tried to kill each other. Teiwaya exclaimed while continuing her struggle. We were enemies, you were betrayed, we have a common foe in that spider shinobi up there. As long as you don't try to kill me after we are free, then I will not strike you, Naruto told her with a frown on his face. Teiwaya scowled and looked up at him and exclaimed, and why should I trust you? My own fucking teammate is going to kill me, so why should I trust my enemy, even a former one? Naruto corked a small grin and said, because I have too much to live for. Teiwaya paused for a moment before she stood stock still while she retorted, well what do I have to fucking lose? Naruto smirked and said, only your life, before flames deep from the NarutoxHarem began to build around the two of them. Teiwaya looked around her fearfully and said, my life is in your hands, you idiot, I'll find you in the afterlife if you fuck up. Naruto chuckled at this and replied, and I will await you in the NarutoxHarem shall I fail. The flames then roared to life, just as Kidomaru shot his arrow, and when the flames died down, Naruto and Teiwaya leaped to the side, barely able to avoid the arrow that pierced and destroyed the stone column they were trapped on. What? Kidomaru shouted in shock. Teiwaya smirked and exclaimed, time to be a woman of my word. Naruto grinned and replied, good, let's serve up BBQ spider arms, courtesy of me. Teiwaya laughed and re-summoned her doki and pointed them at Kidomaru, while Naruto disappeared in a burst of hellfire. Village of Hisako. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto and Teiwaya vs Kidomaru. The battle between the deadly alliance of Naruto and Teiwaya against Kidomaru had been nothing short of smooth sailing for the two shinobi. Teiwaya knew for a fact that Kidomaru was used to being the sharpshooter of the team, he wasn't used to having to be in the front lines actually fighting. But he made the mistake of dealing with two people who were always in the front line, and with her skills and her doki, she could strike anywhere. Seeing Naruto's skills as his enemy showed her that he was a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, Naruto was annoyed. His opponent kept running and gunning, and anytime he or any of Teiwaya's doki got close, he would launch a killer arrow at them before fleeing. The last opponent in his world that did this was Eren Black, and it would annoy him to no end. I suppose some things don't change, Naruto thought to himself as he let out an aggravated shout and launched kunai towards the multi-limbed shinobi, who threw two kunai of his own. Naruto landed on the ground and stabbed the Kubikiri Hacho into the ground before he disappeared with a burst of hellfire, only to reappear next to Kidomaru, and landed a solid punch to the shinobi's face. Kidomaru sneered and launched two fists at Naruto, but this shinobi blocked one fist with his left arm and the second fist with his right arm. Kidomaru's remaining four fists collided with Naruto's chest, which caused the Hellfire Shinobi to soar backward into the awaiting arms of Club Doki. Kickdoki and Spike-Doki dashed past Club Doki and Naruto, and towards Kidomaru, who sneered and notched an arrow that had an explosive tag on it, and shot it towards Spike-Doki, and the moment it collided with the Doki, a large explosion rocked the area. But through the smoke, Kickdoki flew out feet first to try and land a flying kick to Kidomaru, but the Doki's foot was caught by two of the Spider Shinobi's hands. Kidomaru smirked and spun the doki around several times before releasing it, sending the doki into the air where Kidomaru attached three explosive tags on an arrow and shot it towards the doki. Kickdoki twisted its body and slammed the arrow with his right heel, sending it falling to the ground before it exploded, but Kickdoki was struck by another arrow, which exploded upon impact, causing a large cloud of black smoke in the air. Kidomaru would have smirked, but Club Doki flickered before him, while Naruto exploded into view from Hellfire, the former's club swinging down at him, while the latter had a flame-imbued left fist aimed at his stomach. Kidomaru used his upper arms to catch the club, while using two arms to hold back Naruto's flame-covered fist, but when he saw Naruto smirk, panic coursed through his veins. Seconds later, Naruto's other hand, which was holding two kunai, popped into Kidomaru's view, aimed at his face. Kidomaru managed to grab Naruto's wrist with his last set of arms, the tips of the kunai mere inches away from his face. Kidomaru felt safe for a moment, but it was not to last because as he held the arms at bay, he didn't expect Club Doki's foot to slam into his chest, and when it did, it sent him flying backward, releasing the hands of Naruto and the club of Club Doki. Kidomaru bounced and skidded on the ground several times before he used his limbs to claw the ground, slowing down his momentum until he was finally able to stand on his 2 feet and saw Club Doki charging towards him. With a sneer, Kidomaru shouted, "Kumusoka, spider web flower." Several thick strands of web shot out towards Club Doki, slowing down the doki until it was fully trapped within his web, and as the doki struggled, Kidomaru performed several backflips until he leaped into the air, notched his bow and arrow, and launched it towards Club Doki. The doki swung his club to knock the arrow away, but the arrow pierced the club, and then pierced the head of the doki. The demon took 2 steps back as it dropped the club and shattered into dust, but the arrow continued forward to Teiwaya, who was trying to re-summon the 3 doki. Teiwaya narrowly avoided the arrow and ran towards Kidomaru, but each time she brought the flute to her mouth, she was forced to avoid them by dodging them each time she did. They got closer and closer to striking her, until her luck finally ran out when an arrow pierced through her side, causing to gasp out in pain. Teiwaya flew backward from the force of the arrow going through her side, and slammed against the flat side of Naruto's blade. "Teiwaya!" Naruto shouted, but before he could do anything, an arrow was shot towards him, causing Naruto to explode into hellfire and appear by his sword. Naruto could see Teiwaya struggling to get to her feet but kept falling. Naruto knelt down to her side and said, "Just stay here. I will finish this." "No fucking way will have you do this on your own," Teiwaya shouted, but she then closed her eyes and winced in agony. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder and asked, "Are you able to heal yourself?" Teiwaya nodded and said, "Every shinobi in Oda was trained to have some basic medical jutsu. Then use them. I will hold him off until you are ready to continue," Naruto said. Teiwaya opened her mouth to argue, but she nodded. "Good," Naruto told her before he stood up and disappeared in a burst of hellfire. Kidomaru sneered and shouted, "It's time to bust out my ultimate move." With a bite of his thumb and 7 hand signs, Kidomaru slammed his wounded hand to the ground and shouted, "Kuchiyus no Jutsu." But before he could put his hands down to complete the summon, Naruto's body exploded beside him with his Kubikiri Hacho in hand, mid-swing. Kidomaru had no time to dodge as Naruto's sword swung down, taking off the top left arm of the spider shinobi, and sending it flopping to the ground on top of the seal. Kidomaru howled in agony as his right upper arm went to grasp the wound, but Naruto's blade swung upwards, and while Kidomaru was able to avoid being decapitated, his upper right arm was not so lucky, being cleaved off elbow down, causing the other arm to fall on the seal as well. Kidomaru dashed backward to avoid another swipe of Naruto's blade, as tears streamed down his face at the sheer agony he was feeling. As Kidomaru jumped back, Naruto jumped forward and swung his blade at a downward angle, but while Kidomaru managed to avoid being cleaved in half, he now bore a red slice going from his right shoulder to his left hip. Kidomaru landed on the ground and fell to one knee and pulled his bow and arrow, and pulled on it as hard as he could, while Naruto was in the air with his blade in the air, and just as Naruto swung down, Kidomaru growled out, "Spider warbow." Terrible split. Then took his shot, then shouted Kumusoka, "Spiderweb flower." Naruto swung his blade to cleave through the arrow, but it was then Naruto whipped back as webbing collided with his body, causing him to drop his sword, as his body slammed into a pillar and onto the ground, webbing wrapped around his torso and arms. As Naruto lay on the ground beside Teiwaya, who was healing her wound, a dark shadow formed above their heads, and when the two looked up, he saw a gigantic black tarantula with orange stripes going down the back of its abdomen, and it was on a web on the pillars above the three of them. "The hell?" Naruto stated with narrowed eyes. "Oh fuck," Teiwaya growled out with dread. "It's time to end this, and you both. Kayadagumo. It's time." Kidomaru stated, now enraged at the loss of his two limbs and wanting to end this battle before his time was done. Kayadagumo hissed out in anger as a large egg sac fell from its body. Kidomaru jumped into the air with a kunai and sliced the large egg sac through the middle as he shouted Kayadagumo. Takutakish plus Dezu Amagumo, venomous raining spiders. Naruto and Teiwaya watched as dozens of small spiders poured from the torn opening coming down towards the two of them, all of them, and they were all pulsating with sickly green chakra. The spiders hissed as they flew down towards the pair, but before they could strike, a voice shouted, "Hyoten. Makyu Hyasho Kaitai, Ice Style. Demonic Ice Crystal Mirror Sphere." Just then, several ice mirrors formed around the two before they closed up, creating a dome around them. "What the hell?" Teiwaya stammered out, but Naruto merely shut his eyes and smiled. "Thank you for saving us, Haku-chan," Naruto said as Haku stepped out of the mirror, a navy blue face mask over her face, her eyes narrowed in annoyance. "There are many ways I dislike being woken up, but to have someone burst into my room with a crying Oto konoichi really takes the cake, Naruto-kun. When we are done, we have some words," Haku said before she turned to Teiwaya and asked, "Who is this?" "I'm Teiwaya." "Oto, well, former Oto shinobi," Teiwaya replied. Haku nodded for a moment before she turned to Naruto and asked, "You trust her?" "Well, she is fighting that Spider-Man out there, so yes. I'm trusting her for now," Naruto replied. Haku nodded and tilted her head as the sounds of explosions shook the dome. "Well then, let's handle this one properly," Haku said as she knelt to Naruto. With a few hand seals, she placed her hand on the webbing around Naruto and said, "Hyoten. Ice Itachi, Ice Style. Ice Touch." The ice formed against the webbing around Naruto's body. Haku punched the frozen web, causing it all to shatter around Naruto's body. Naruto stood up and faced Haku before leaning his head forward to kiss her as thanks for freeing him, something Haku accepted enthusiastically before the two broke apart. Once the two did, Naruto turned his head and asked Teiwaya, "Do you know the jutsu?" Teiwaya nodded and answered, "Yeah. It's a bitch to deal with. Basically, those spiders are set to explode the moment they hit the ground, and when they die, they send out a toxic fog that could kill you if you're in it too long. It's Kidomaru's ultimate jutsu. The only way the poison fades away is if you kill him." Teiwaya then grinned and added, "For him to bust this out, we must be some trouble to him." Teiwaya then laughed but stopped immediately when the pain set in. "You're hurt," Haku said as she knelt by Teiwaya's side. "Move your hand so I can see how bad it is," Haku commanded. Teiwaya looked to Naruto, who nodded his head, which made Teiwaya move her hands away from her wound, albeit reluctantly. Haku looked at the wound and said, "I can heal this." Naruto stepped to the front of the dome with the Kubikiri Hacho in his hands and said, "Good Haku-chan. Heal her and then join me out there. It's time to send this pest to the Netherrealm." Haku nodded and melted an ice mirror in front of Naruto and said, "We'll join you once I am done then, Naruto-kun, and please, be careful." Naruto smiled at her and nodded before he quickly dashed out with the Kubikiri Hacho, with the ice mirror forming behind him. The moment Naruto stepped out of the dome, he immediately covered his mouth. The entire area was coated with toxic fumes. Unlike his time as Scorpion, where he was immune to poisonous toxins, he wasn't too sure that his body this time around was immune, and he was not going to take any chances. He had to do something quick so Haku and Teiwaya wouldn't walk out into this. Naruto spun his blade and jumped up onto a pillar, above the poisonous mist, and narrowed his eyes in thought as he crouched on top of it. Where was he? It was then Naruto heard something coming towards him from the toxic mist. Naruto jumped off of the pillar and landed on the side of another pillar nearby, just as an arrow crashed through the first one, causing it to splinter into large chunks of cement. "I'm going to take your head." Kidomaru's voice shouted from the mist before another arrow shot out from the mist. Naruto let go of the edge of the pillar and pushed himself off, falling into the mist, but onto another pillar. Just as his foot landed on the pillar, he quickly jumped off, avoiding another arrow that destroyed the pillar. "You took both of my arms. I will make you pay. Whether by the poison or by my arrows." Kidomaru screamed as Naruto rolled onto the roof of Hisako's shrine, which he quickly jumped off of to avoid another arrow that struck the shrine, destroying it. The moment Naruto landed on the ground, he felt an immense sense of dread immediately hit the area. And that's when Naruto heard it. Indelible Hisako, Tomb of Flame. Village of Hisako. Pav. Momochi Haku and Teiwaya. Haku performed several hand seals before she said, Hyoten. H+ ring Itachi, ice style. Healing touch. A faint mist of ice flowed from Haku's palms as she placed her hands on Teiwaya's wound, which caused her to wince at the immediate pain, but then it began to fade. The cooling sensation was nice on her. If Teiwaya could place it, it would be like having a mint and drinking some ice-cold water at the same time. Totally refreshing. Teiwaya could feel the wound closing, thankful that despite the pain, the arrow had gone straight through her without any amount of damage, but she knew she had gotten lucky. Kidomaru was her, the Sound 5's marksman, their sharpshooter. If he had no distractions from Naruto or her doki, he would have taken her down. Which only angered her further. You look angry, Teiwaya, was it? Haku asked as she looked at the maroon-haired girl. Teiwaya scowled and said, damn right I'm angry. My team decided to betray me. It's even worse because Kidomaru, the guy we're fighting, he was the only one I thought was my friend. Haku stared at her with a sad expression on her face, her hands still working to heal Teiwaya of her wounds, while the latter continued to rant. Hell, not even thought. He was my friend, and for him to just drop me like this and kill me, just because of Orochimaru's cock-sleeve Kimimaro getting all uppity. It makes me sick. It makes me sick that I even cared about him, and it sure as hell makes me feel like following that old rule of DTA. DTA? Haku repeated curiously. Don't trust anyone, Teiwaya replied with a frown on her face. The two sat in silence for a moment as Haku continued to work on the wound before she said, when I was younger, I used to live in Kirigakure no Sato. During my years, bloodlines were forbidden, and anyone with one was to die. My father found out my mother had a bloodline, and he betrayed and murdered her, and tried to kill me as well, until I killed him. Haku let a wry smirk appear on her face and said, I lived by that same motto of DTA, until I met the demon of the hidden mist Momochi Zabuza, who went from training me to his weapon into seeing me as his daughter. Teiwaya was silent for a moment, due to a mix of surprise at the famed demon of the hidden mist being her father, as well as Haku telling her this. Haku looked back at the wound and said, the shinobi that was in here, Uzumaki Naruto, I was his enemy, sent undercover by someone I viewed as a father, but I fell in love with him, but I betrayed him by fighting him, and he died for me, despite what I had done to him, and he will never know this. I will always carry that guilt with me. Teiwaya finally looked at Haku and asked, why the fuck are you telling me this? Haku gave a kind smile and replied, betrayal can poison not only your mind, but your heart as well. It can cause you to lash out and hurt many people just so you don't get hurt again, but sometimes, even a deep betrayal can lead you to something wonderful that can last a lifetime. Haku then placed a hand on her shoulder and said, I know you're hurting now, but that wound will heal, unless you yourself keep it open. So don't let what Kidomaru did poison you to miss out on something wonderful. Teiwaya narrowed her eyes and opened her mouth to speak, but Haku smiled and said, though considering how this mission is turning out, I don't know what will happen in the future. So until the mission ends, how do you feel? Teiwaya blinked and looked at her side. The wound was gone and she felt great. Whoa, a little cold, but it feels awesome. You're some medic, Teiwaya said with a grin on her face. Thanks for the pep talk. I don't know what will happen, but I will keep those words in mind. Haku smiled and replied, I did learn from the best. Don't thank me until everything works out. Now let's get out there and help Naruto-kun. Just then, a feeling of dread the konoichi in the chest, like a sledgehammer. Haku and Teiwaya glanced at each other, and that was when Haku dispelled her ice crystals, but when she did, their eyes widened in shock. Naruto was standing stock still a few feet away from the two of them with his back to them, and all around him was blood. His entire body was drenched in it. The entire man-made crater had blood so high up, it was up to their ankles. Kami, what did he do? Teiwaya asked, but Haku looked pale. It wasn't him, Naruto-kun didn't do this, Haku softly told her. Teiwaya looked at her in alarm and said he's all alone here. Who could have done it? Haku didn't look at Teiwaya, but she merely pointed ahead to where Naruto was standing. Teiwaya turned to face Naruto, and at first, she saw nothing wrong, but then she noticed something in front of him. It was faint, but she could see that there was an image of a teenage girl standing by his side, her hair slick with a torn red kimono, and in her hand was Naruto's blade. And in her other hand was the head of Kidomaru. The girl looked at Teiwaya and Haku, and both girls took a step back when the girl's sickly gray eyes locked onto them, and slowly, she smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Just then, the girl flickered out of existence, dropping the Kubikiri Hacho next to Naruto, still standing for him. The two quickly ran to Naruto and ran in front of them, but when they saw his face, there was this look Haku had never seen on his face. She couldn't even place what the expression was. Whatever it was, it made her fear the girl who stood at his side more than she would ever know. Unknown location. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. Drip, drip, drip. Naruto's eyes slowly opened as the feeling of liquid dripping on his right cheek woke him up to pitch black. Naruto leaned up from the ground and wiped his right cheek. When he looked down, he noticed that what was dropping on him was blood. Great, Naruto muttered as he rose up from his position and stood up. From what he saw around him, from the ground around him which held stalagmites to the ceiling that held stalactites to walls that were rough and cutting, he realized that he was in a cave. The cave dripping blood. At least his clothes were still somewhat dry. From the breeze that hit his body, he could feel that he was at an intersection within the cave with a trail to his left and right, as well as in front of him and behind him. But he truly didn't have time to explore the cave. He needed to get out because the sooner he did, the sooner he could escape. After forming his hand in that familiar seal, Naruto said Kage Bushin no Jutsu, allowing him to summon 4 clones. Dispel yourselves once you find an exit. Go, Naruto commanded. The 4 clones saluted before they ran to their respective trails, while Naruto shut his eyes and sat down with his legs crossed, entering a meditative state. While his clones looked for an exit, he needed to think about how he got here in the first place. Village of Hisako, flashback. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. I'm going to take your head. Kidomaru's voice shouted from the mist before another arrow shot out from the mist. Naruto let go of the edge of the pillar and pushed himself off, falling into the mist, but onto another pillar. Just as his foot landed on the pillar, he quickly jumped off, avoiding another arrow that destroyed the pillar. You took both of my arms. I will make you pay. Whether by the poison or by my arrows. Kidomaru screamed as Naruto rolled onto the roof of Hisako's shrine, which he quickly jumped off of to avoid another arrow that struck the shrine, destroying it. The moment Naruto landed on the ground, he felt an immense sense of dread immediately hit the area. And that's when Naruto heard it. Indelible Hisako, Tomb of Flame. The poison mist around the entire field seemed to stop in place mid-movement, before the mist began to rapidly recede towards the now destroyed shrine, which revealed Kidomaru, who was on a pillar across from Naruto, looking confused. The mist continued to head towards the shrine until the battlefield was completely clear of it, but the shrine itself had the mist flowing around it, forming an orb. Slowly, Naruto watched as the undead body of Hisako walked out of the orb, her silky black hair falling down her face, her body hunched over, and her body seemed to flicker in and out of reality. What the hell is that? Naruto heard Kidomaru shout from behind him, but Naruto's eyes kept on the form of the slow-moving undead teen. Suddenly, Hisako's body flickered to the left, revealing her to be crawling on her hands and feet, before she flickered to the right beside Naruto's body. Uzumaki Naruto, I asked for your help and you let this intruder destroy my shrine, Hisako wailed in Naruto's ear, which made him dash away from her. It wasn't by choice, mind you, Naruto replied as he lifted his hand up to his right ear, only to feel liquid. He moved his hand down from his ear and saw blood in his hand. Naruto quickly turned to Hisako, but she flickered into existence before him and shouted, you shall suffer with him. Naruto barely managed to avoid the swipe of her left hand, and used his blade to block her right hand and said, you must understand. It wasn't by my choice that your shrine was destroyed. Control your rage or else I will force you to control it. My rage, Hisako shouted as she flicked to his right and slammed her palm against his right cheek, sending him skidding back, but just as she flickered beneath him in a crouch, Naruto leaped into the air to avoid her sweep, and delivered an axe kick down to her head, but before it could connect, she flickered away. You dare talk to me about rage, Hisashi Hanzo. Hisako's voice echoed around the area, while Naruto stayed on high alert. Suddenly, Hisako flickered into existence to the right of him, and aimed a high kick to his face, but Naruto leaned back to avoid it, before he twisted his body, and aimed a punch to her face, but again, she flickered away to avoid it. Hisako flickered behind him with her left arm poised to strike, but this time, Naruto saw her coming and quickly turned around and punched her in the face, which sent her sailing into the air before she flickered out of existence. Naruto then heard whistling coming from behind him, which made him turn around to see an arrow from Kidomaru heading toward him at top speed. Naruto swung his blade and sliced through the arrow, but the second he did, Hisako flickered before him with her mouth open to inhuman levels, as an ethereal shadow around her did the same, and that was when Naruto could feel the air around him being sucked into her open mouth. The suction was powerful, and despite Naruto trying to transport himself out of the area, he was barely able to get a hint of hellfire before he fell into her mouth, but suddenly, her body disappeared. But she wasn't gone. He could feel her within his body. He could hear her whispers within his mind. He could feel her anger coursing through his veins. He wasn't in control of his body, she was. And with her control came an intense agony that while it didn't hurt his body, it was his spirit that was suffering the damage. It was as if there was sharp glass within his soul, and the tiniest movement caused a deep gash. Do not fear Uzumaki Naruto, she said within his mind. Your body is mine to command. Get out of my body. Naruto screamed out in fury, trying to will his hellfire to aid him, but to his horror, the flames never came. Instead, he could feel the cold embrace of her soul wrapped around his, trapping him in place. He could feel his body moving, but he couldn't see what his body was doing, all he could see was her face. Her eyes. Those pale, dead gray eyes stared into his enraged blue ones. As before, he could hear chanting in his head as her face grew ever so closer to his own, a large toothy smirk on her face. Bloody, bloody rage. Weep, weep, our guardian. I will let you live, but I will make you wish you hadn't, Hisako whispered roughly as her spirit began to glow brightly. Indelible Hisako, indelible grudge. Slaughter, massacre of tragedy. But then he saw it. The flicker of crimson chakra swirled from behind him, followed by the laughter of a woman, but this laugh was filled with malicious intent. Thank you for waking me, Hisako. The voice said as another bout of dark laughter erupted around the two of them. It was then he felt a large amount of killing intent around the two. He could see Hisako's eyes widen, as if she was terrified of what she saw, and it was then her soul left his body, and suddenly he was back in control, but when managed to see, he found himself standing in a bloody wasteland. And beside him was Hisako, with his own blade in one hand and Kidomaru's head in the other, her eyes locked onto his with fear in them. What is inside of you? She asked with terror in her voice. Naruto wanted to laugh at her expression of fear, but he couldn't. He felt off, he felt exhausted. His body was seconds away from dropping. All he could do was stare at her. Hisako smirked and said, no matter what that powerful entity was, I can sense your fear of what I nearly accomplished, find my treasured possession, and I won't capitalize on your weakness again, Hisashi. He could barely keep his eyes on her, but that was when she vanished, leaving his sword and the head of his opponent beside him, and the moment he saw Haku, everything went black. Unknown location, present. Pav. Uzumaki Naruto. The Kyuubi, she must have been the one to save me from whatever Hisako was planning to do with my soul, Naruto said as he opened his eyes. If there was one thing that he truly feared, it was someone having the ability to mess with his body. His soul had been twisted and molded once before by Kwankai, and having Hisako do it brought up some horrible memories for him. What she had done admittedly shook him to his core, but he couldn't allow that fear to overwhelm him. He has conquered many trials in his life, this will make no difference, and if she did try that again, he would send her spirit scattered to the wind like ashes. All he could do now was wait until he found a way out. Village of Hisako. Pav. The konoichi trio. Holy, so he was covered in blood? Fu asked after Haku relayed what had happened at the shrine of Hisako to the front desk employee. The moment that teenage girl vanished from sight, Naruto had fallen unconscious, leaving Haku and Teiwaya to return to the hotel, with the former carrying his body. Naruto was currently resting on the bed, dressed in a basic white tank top and white pants. His other clothes were currently being washed to clean the blood. Teiwaya was leaning against the wall across from Naruto's bed, with a foot propped up against the wall, her arms crossed against her chest. Yeah. It's strange as hell honestly, Teiwaya stated as she stared at the blonde shinobi. He was keeping up with both me and that six-armed dick the entire time. To see him be the one out cold is concerning. And also, who the fuck was that freaky spirit thing beside him? Teiwaya then looked at Fu and asked, just what in the hell is this village? That's a good question, Fu replied, her voice suddenly becoming heated. What is in this village that caused you Oto shinobi to come here, raid the place and treat the villagers like scum? Haku turned to Fu in shock. She may have known her for a short time, but Fu was always very cheerful. For her to sound so angry, it put her off guard. Teiwaya however didn't seem so surprised by her anger. In fact, from where Haku was standing, she could see a look of understanding on Teiwaya's face. It's okay to be mad. I'm not going to shy away from what I did because that isn't me, Teiwaya stated as she turned her head in Fu's direction. Basically, our mission was twofold. 1. Find this special Naginata that is told to hold the spirit of a powerful entity for the snake dick to control, and 2. Wipe this village off the map, Teiwaya said. Wipe out the village, Fu shouted out in anger. That's right, Teiwaya replied calmly. The dickhead wanted to make sure that since this village didn't have over the Naginata when he demanded it, that we were to wipe it out once we found it. That monster, Haku murmured, a bead of sweat falling down the side of her head as she glanced at Fu. The girl was radiating some fierce killing intent, so much so that she could practically see crimson chakra exploding to life around her. Then her eyes had changed as well, they were orange before, and now they were crimson. What in the world was going on with her? Teiwaya noticed this as well because she then pushed herself off against the wall and said, if you want to hit me then do so. I won't stop you but once you do, I will make sure to fight you until the bitter end. Teiwaya, Haku warned, but Teiwaya shook her head and stepped closer until she looked Fu right in her eyes, unwavering. Don't try and stop it, Haku, Teiwaya said. It's her right to be pissed off of someone who has killed people she probably knows and cares for. I do the same. I have some honor after all. The room was silent as Teiwaya stared into the crimson eyes of Fu, the former of the two, waiting for the latter to strike them down, but then the latter spoke. Just tell me, did you take pleasure in what you did? Fu asked softly. Teiwaya's eyes widened in surprise at the question, as did Haku's. Did I take pleasure in killing? What type of question is that? Teiwaya asked. Just answer it, Fu shouted. Teiwaya lowered her head and answered, I love the thrill of battle, I will not lie to you there. Something about fighting the strongest around sends my heart all pitter-patter, but killing innocent civilians, it disgusted me. I will complete my mission objectives nonetheless, but I will not find joy in it. Haku could hear the truth in Taewaya's voice, but she wondered if Fu would hear it as well. Another tense minute passed as Taewaya and Fu stared at each other, but after the minute passed, the chakra faded away as Fu shut her eyes, and began to count backward until she reached 0, before she then opened her eyes to reveal their original orange color. The air suddenly became light, and Haku found the killing intent fading away. I can understand that in our line of work, we do things that we don't want to do, but some take pleasure in killing. Like your friend that Naruto-san and Haku-san killed that day, as long as you don't take joy in killing them, I won't have to kill you, Fu said in a calm voice. Fu then narrowed her eyes at Taewaya and added, but do not think for 1 second that we are friends. Once this is over, you and I will hash things out over the lives you did take while you were here. Understood. Crystal, Taewaya answered with a grin as she held out her right hand and added, such an edge in your voice, you must have some skill if you threaten me of all people. I'm used to dealing with shinobi, Fu responded darkly as she shook Taewaya's hand. All the while, Haku was watching Fu with narrowed eyes. Guess who was this girl? Haku shook her head and said, now that this is done, we need to figure out our next plan. Fu nodded and said removed her hand from Taewaya's grasp, and asked the shinobi across from her, so this Naginata, were Odo able to find it? Taewaya shrugged and said, that I am unsure of. The girl you guys took before I battled the blonde wonder over there was sent there to find it. Haku and Fu glanced at each other before Fu quickly turned around and walked out of the room. 3 minutes later, Fu returned with the unconscious Kin over her shoulder, while dragging a wooden chair behind her. Once she sat the chair down, Fu placed Kin on it, turned to Taewaya, and asked, do you want to do the honors or should I? Taewaya nodded and knelt in front of Kin, and patted her left cheek quickly as she said, wake up Kin. This is not the fucking time for a nap. Kin's eyes squeezed together before they fluttered open, which caused Taewaya to grin. Good afternoon, sleeping beauty. Rest well. I had a horrible dream about this blonde demon who tore through many of our shinobi, Kin started, but as she looked around, she noticed Haku and Fu, and then when she looked at the bed, she began to panic when she noticed the blonde shinobi resting. Then it wasn't a dream, she stammered before she turned to Taewaya, who had a sympathetic smile on her. No dream, Kin-chan. That blonde demon did come and wipe out quite a few of us, Taewaya told her with a frown on her face. Then how are you here? Kin exclaimed. I was betrayed by Odo, Taewaya said bitterly, which caused Kin to gasp. No way, you were super loyal to Odo. Why did they betray you? Kin shouted. Taewaya snorted and stood upright and said, because I don't fit their mold or some shit like that. The blonde demon and I fought Kidomaru until he was killed, bullshit I know. Kin scowled and said, that is horrible, but to side with the one that killed Dosu and Zaku and many of our men, it's crazy. Taewaya let out a bitter laugh and replied, I know, but a crazy part of me wants revenge for them tossing me away like trash. Kin nodded and said I understand, and you know that it puts me at odds, right? I don't want to betray you but I know, Taewaya said with a sad smile. You want to stay loyal to Odo. I get the Kin-chan. Don't sweat it. They wouldn't know you told me anything. But I need to know, did you guys find the mission objective? Kin nodded and said, we were able to find it. Before that blonde demon attacked, Zaku had ordered someone to take it to where you, the Sound 4 were staying. If they didn't bump into the blonde demon, it should be there by nightfall. Taewaya glanced at both Fu and Haku and began with welp, we got what we needed, as she stood up from her crouched position, crossed her arms, and continued, so should we wake up the blonde wonder there, so we can get going? Hey wait, Kin yelled. What about me? Aren't you going to let me go? Taewaya turned her head and pulled out a kunai and cut a rope around Kin and said, get out of here and leave this village as soon as you can. I cannot promise your safety if you stay. Kin still looked unsure, but she nodded and said, okay, thank you Taewaya-chan. Kin leaned forward and embraced the Redeed, who returned the hug immediately before Kin said, be safe. Despite being with Odo, I do not want to lose another friend. Taewaya nodded and said, you won't. Now go. Kin nodded and took a few steps to the door before she turned to Haku and Fu, and nodded at them as well before she ran out the door, closing it after her. Taewaya turned back to Haku and Fu and said, now shall we wake him up? Haku nodded and walked to Naruto's unconscious form, and shook him as she said, wake up Naruto-kun. But Naruto remained sleeping. Haku shrugged and shook him again, and yet he didn't move. Naruto-kun. Haku said, her voice growing more urgent as she shook him again, but he still remained sleeping. What is going on? Why won't he wake up? Haku said as she moved her hands away from him. Fu walked up to the other side of Naruto's body and groaned, this is just great, our one hope of killing these monster Soto shinobi, out cold, well, we'll just have to go with plan B. Haku looked up to Fu and asked, and what would that be? I can't wait to hear this plan, Taewaya said with a sneer, while Kin remained silent, eyeing the three girls. Fu walked to the window beside the bed and said, I haven't been honest with you or Naruto-san, Haku-san. I am not just a girl that works at the front desk of this place. I am a former konoichi from Takagakure no Seto. Haku chuckled and replied, I had a feeling, you stare off with Teiwaya-san gave it away by why former. Because I have the unfortunate issue of being the Jinchuriki of Nanabi no Chime, Fu said hesitantly, not even wanting to admit it out loud. Both konoichi gasped in shock at the news. Haku knew of Jinchuriki due to Zabuza's teachings about them, while Teiwaya knew of them due to Orochimaru, advising them to either run or kill a Jinchuriki on sight. But none of them have ever seen one in person. I ran because I was sick of the hatred I saw in the eyes of those I was sworn to protect, so I came here and the villagers, they treated me great. Like I was a real person. Fu responded softly as she shut her eyes. I was finally happy, I finally belonged, but then Odo showed up and hurt those that I cared about. Fu then opened her eyes with anger within them. So since they invaded, I've been studying them, but there were so many of them, I wasn't sure how to strike them until. Fu then looked at Naruto's body, then at Haku, and said, until you two showed up. During my watch, I saw you both fight off those damn Odo shinobi and kill them without any hesitation. It was then I realized that I had the help I needed. I even left a note on the window to ask for your help. Haku nodded and said, yeah, it was that note that made me and Naruto-kun investigate further. Fu crossed her arms and said, so, you guys know of my secret and why I am here. So, will you guys help me? Jinchuriki, both Haku and Teiwaya repeated slowly. The two then glanced at each other before Haku shook her head and said, my father told me about Jinchuriki, before he died, our Mizukage was one. I have no qualms about that. You have my help. Orochi team told all of Odo about them. I don't care if you have a demon in you, I still plan to trounce you after all this is done. Demon or not. You did throw down the gauntlet after all. Besides, Odo betrayed me. I can't leave that shit unfinished. Fu turned round to face both Haku and Teiwaya, the former having a small smile, while the other had a smirk on her face, and seeing that smirk made a grin. You won't be able to trounce me, but you can try, the teal green-haired girl responded. But thank you both. With Naruto being unconscious, I am now stepping into the fray. It's about time I stop hiding in the shadows and step into the light of battle. Then let's gear up and go. We got 3 more assholes to kill, Teiwaya said to the two konoichi with a grin. Haku and Fu nodded, but while Fu and Teiwaya left the room, Haku turned to Naruto and stared at him for a moment before she leaned down and placed a small kiss on his lips and said, please wake up soon, before she walked out of the room. Village of Hisako, Mayor's Mansion. Pov. The Sound 3. This is taking far too long, Kidomaru should have been back by now, Seiken said to Kidomaru with a scowl on his face. Yukin cocked a brow and suggested, perhaps Teiwaya and Kidomaru failed in killing this new opponent. Kidomaru nodded in agreement and said, Kidomaru is one of our skilled sniper shinobi. He should have been back a long time ago with the heads of both our opponent and Teiwaya. Something must have gone wrong. Just then, the door slammed open to reveal an Odo shinobi and a long item which was wrapped up in white paper, with a single seal written on the item. Kidomaru-san, we found it. Village of Hisako. Pov. Tsuchi-kin. Kin slowed down from her sprint and leaned against a streetlight near the gates of this village, her pants coming out heavily. From the moment she left the hotel, Kin had been running since, and she was quickly growing exhausted. But Teiwaya told her to escape the village as quickly as possible. But she was so tired, she just needed a second to rest before she continued her journey. But as she stood there catching her breath, a faint mist began to form around the area. Kin blinked in confusion at the mist. The sun was barely setting and all of a sudden, the mist started to settle. Kin leaned away from the streetlight as a feeling of dread began to fill her being. And it was then she heard it. Indelible Hisako, Tomb of Flame. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.